Well, I'd like to welcome everyone out to this panel discussion presented by Arbisoft on the future of EdTech, trends and predictions. We're excited for a really great and riveting discussion. And so let's get going. I'll let the esteemed panelists, go ahead and introduce themselves so we can get going. Let's see, Tim, would you like to go ahead and start us off?
Sure. My name is Tim Mosel, and I've been teaching at the college level since 1993. Last year, I moved to a new campus in our system, Lone Star College, online. I had been at the face-to-face class with several online courses, and as of last year, my courses are all online. In addition to teaching, I've been doing programming, and back before ChatGPT was released in October, I created an educational program for AI, utilizing my programming skills, and I've also integrated it into an existing program that I have for kinesiology faculty and students. So AI has been a really great welcome to my classes and to my programming. So I'm fabulous with the AI, and I'm ready to go.
Awesome. I love it. Well, welcome and thank you for bringing your expertise to this panel. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. Amelia, feel free. Let's hear about yourself.
Hi, everyone. Good morning from Japan. I'm an American who's a long-term resident here, and I have over 20 years in the language learning experience of being an English teacher and also a Japanese learner. And most recently, I've been involved with research with Immerse VR. And just recently, they have the chatbots inside the virtual reality environment. And I'm looking forward to discussions about that today. And also during 2021, I was teaching Japanese inside a headset to students in North America. So I'm really interested in today's topic. Thank you, and thank the other panelists. It looks like we're going to have a good discussion today.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you, Amelia. And Holly.
Hi, everyone. My name is Holly Owens, and I'm an instructional designer with Amazon Pharmacy, but I spent the better part of my career in higher education as an instructional technologist or instructional designer. I still teach instructional design courses, master's level with Toro University. And I also run a podcast called Edtech, which our network has over 350,000 downloads. Our little podcast has about 15,000, but we're pretty big on the scale when it comes to the network. And we interview people from all different, walks of life in EdTech, CEOs, founders, people who are influencers in the industry. We demo different types of tools for our audience. So it's really been a fun journey. I started out my career as a high school teacher, and now I'm doing all these fun things and I get to be on the panel here.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. Thank you for those great introductions. Like I said, I think it should be a really great discussion. So let's jump right in. The first question is open to everyone. What do you believe is the most exciting or revolutionary aspect of EdTech that has the potential to truly transform education in the next few years?
I'll jump in on that. I would say personalized learning and instant tutoring. So the ability for students to receive instant feedback is incredible, and it's extremely helpful. One of the products that I built offers instant feedback. So in the faculty area, I can input the assignment, I input the grading rubric. Then on the student dashboard, they can put their written paper in there, and they receive feedback based on the assignment, based on the rubric. So it's very specific. It might say, you mentioned 2 things. The assignment says to mention 3 things. So please rewrite that portion of your paper. And I've been using that instant feedback for the past 3 semesters. And my students' writing has noticeably been improved just because of that tutoring. So I think that's really exciting. And my sister is a 4th grade teacher. In her classroom, she has the students at computers writing papers, and she goes around and gives feedback to each student. So she got parental permission for one of the students to use my product to do feedback for his paper. And so he got the feedback. He's all excited about it. But what was really cool is that a few days later, she sent me a text message and she said, my student comes in every day to class beaming with excitement. He wants to write another paper. And I thought, wow, how powerful is that, that you have a fourth grader excited to write papers. I know when I was in fourth grade, I wasn't excited to write papers, or fifth grade, or sixth grade, and on and on and on. So with that instant tutoring, personalization of curriculum, I think it's really exciting. I think it's going to be really beneficial for students as well as teachers and professors.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And I'd like to jump in there and agree with Tim 100%. I think that the personalized learning has got us, once you experience it in the classroom, it's kind of has us questioning how we ever had a class where everyone was kind of on the same page, 30 students waiting for the teacher to go ahead or go back to instruction. This way, every student can have their questions answered. They can move ahead, they can go back. And it's just such a different classroom environment that once you get used to it, you're wondering, wow, we really did like traditional classrooms back in the day, like, you know, how they are now. So I think the future is personalized learning with the instant feedback, with the large language models that have come out to have conversations and to ask why this is wrong. It's really pushed the individualization of education into something that is obtainable even for, I mean, with the ChatGPT available online, it's almost like anyone can kind of get in the game now. Before it was kind of an elitist thing where the, you know, Edtech companies and the people that had the big grants were kind of on the forefront. So I do think it's an equalizer. And I do think that's the major change that's coming up.
I agree with both of you, and Amelia's touching on what I wanted to say about the inclusivity and accessibility that's become more of a priority in the ed tech industry. I've talked to a lot of different founders and CEOs recently on my show who have made this a top priority at their company, making sure things like in the States, we have 508 compliance, you know, ADA compliance, that their tools are meeting those expectations along with WCAG standards that are, you know, influencing how things are done, not just out on the web, but how we teach, how we learn, how we deliver our content. So I'm really looking forward to all those things in combination with the personalized learning aspect that's really going to impact in a positive way what's happening in the ed tech space.
And so all three of you mentioned personalized learning, which is kind of a buzzword in the edutech space. In reference to that, with the rise of remote and hybrid learning, what are the key challenges that edtech companies need to address in order to provide an effective virtual education solution? And I'll go ahead and target this one to Amelia, but what do you think personalized learning and remote learning and hybrid learning, what are some challenges that may be there?
I think one of the biggest challenges for remote learning and hybrid learning is to go past just content delivery. I think when we were doing emergency remote teaching, we just wanted to get the content to students. And now we see that there's an emotional side, there's a whole person education that we need to address, not only intellectually, but emotionally and socially, all these learners. And I think instead of going back for the people that want to go back to face to get that emotional connection, that we need to move forward in online education, because that's the future, that's the inclusivity, which Holly mentioned, that's where we can come together. And just being here today on this panel has me thinking that the global collaboration is really just what we're here now, and let's just push it forward and do the emotional and emotional learning and the whole person education.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to chime in?
Sure. So I think one issue is certainly going to be, as my mind goes blank, keeping them accountable for what they're doing online. So the accountability is a big issue. It depends on the discipline. My discipline is kinesiology. So for some of the classes, there's a activity component where traditionally they're in class doing lecture and then they go to the gym and they do their workouts, or they hand in a spreadsheet with their workouts. And that was a big issue when things started to go online. So my solution for that was to require students to wear activity trackers. And then I created the eFit software that tracks all their activity, assigns a grade based on certain criteria. So it makes them a little bit more accountable for their activity, but just other things such as assessment. Are we assessing the student, or are we assessing their parent who's taking the exam for them, or their friend? So there's challenges with that, which there's solutions for that as well, but I don't know that they're absolutely perfect. You know, there's cameras, there's AI techniques where it's checking to make sure the person is there and focused on what they're supposed to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it boils down to, you know, being creative, figuring out how you can deal with those types of issues. And additionally, accessibility can be an issue. Not all students have access to the internet, and that needs to change. And for countries that it's a challenge, such as parts of Africa, government involvement needs to be very, very big to make sure that students are getting internet access and at least access to some type of a phone or a computer so they can access the online training and access the ChatGPT and the other AI tools. Because if they don't have access, imagine you have children in a certain part of the world being exposed to AI from a young age, other parts of the world, no exposure whatsoever. There's going to be a huge discrepancy in the future based on just accessibility to the internet and to AI.
Thank you. Holly, did you have anything? I can move on to the next
No,
one.
these two covered it.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
I noticed that you both mentioned basically the future of the classroom instruction in essence. And so how do you envision the role of teachers evolving in an increasingly tech-driven educational landscape? And what skills do they need to adapt to in order to thrive?
I think teachers need to start modeling how we can use AI to augment intelligence. We're not going to replace ourselves with AI, but we're going to be able to amplify or emphasize some of the intelligence that we have as humans. And I think that right now, everyone here is in a gray zone with this, but it's important to model to the students how we're working together and how we're working forward, because there's no going back now. It's like someone turned on the electricity and, you know, asking our students to study by candlelight. We're not going back. So the best we can do is model. We can experiment. We can do things. I think every educator is going to have that one semester where they're like, whoa, none of my assessments are, you know, foolproof and stuff. And so I think that it's just important that we're out there too, and maybe we're a little vulnerable to the new technology too. Our position will change.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely think it's important. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tim.
Go ahead.
No, I definitely think it's important that you know, we're on a united front here and not, you know, creating that resistance when it comes as educators, but also at the higher levels, we have to have training put in place for educators so that they feel comfortable and confident in the classrooms where they are using these tools, because we're meeting students where they're at. These things that are coming out, this is what they're seeing every day, the mobile devices, the TikToks, the micro learning, all the different things. So making sure that the educators feel comfortable and confident in their skills, so that I know a lot of fear is instilled when new tech comes out and you're using it for the first time in the classroom. You're like, I don't know if this is, and something fails, and then you never go back to it because there's been this barrier for you, and in your head you're like, I can't do this again, I'm super embarrassed. But the thing is if we have, you know, steps put into place, then we can create an environment that is, you know, successful for everybody, and that includes the educator, so they have the confidence, and then the students are going to truly benefit from that.
Thank you.
And, you know, it was mentioned that it's here, there's no going back. Unfortunately, I see a lot of going back. I see a lot of I've had the opportunity to speak to faculty at a lot of different colleges, and I'm hearing stories of going back to the blue books, writing in the classroom, using faulty AI detectors, and there's so much resistance right now. And I get asked all the time, are teachers going to be replaced by AI? Well, I think teachers will be replaced by AI that don't adapt and don't change. Let's take Rate My Professor, for example. If there's a teacher being, especially say college level, because that's what I'm most familiar with, and they're using the AI detectors, they're doing blue book writings, and they're doing things old school, like even going back even further, like the way it's done before the internet came out. There's going to be reviews that say this class is old school, it sucks, it's not fun, it's not exciting for me. And then you have other classes with professors that are doing new things and exciting things and engaging things, using technology and AR, VR, AI, using all these tools to make learning fun and exciting. Who are the students going to go to? The dinosaurs of education are, I think, are going to push themselves out. I don't think AI is going to do it. I think they'll do it themselves. So I do think it's important that faculty get the training and they get the experience to adapt to what this new educational landscape is going to be. At each of my talks, I do a survey and I ask, how many of you use ChatGPT once a week? Well, a couple of hands go up. 2 times a week, 3 times, and I go up to 7. I say, who has never used it? And I will typically see 70% of college professors raise their hand that have never even used it. So here we have a tool that's going to change not just education, but the entire world in many, many ways. And there's faculty and teachers that have never even used this tool. And I think it's our obligation to become very familiar with it, because the future job market for our students is going to require AI experience, ChatGPT experience. And unless we're teaching the students that, we're not doing them any favors by blocking it from their usage. And I'll get off my rant on that because I could
No,
keep
you're
going.
good. You're good. I think all of us have experience in the teaching world. Holly, I'm an instructional designer as well. And so I've
Oh,
transitioned.
nice.
Yeah, so I've transitioned from the academic world to more of a corporate world. And so I can definitely hear what you're saying, Tim, about the need to adapt. The dinosaurs will kind of push themselves out. And I'm sure you guys can all relate to that. So in essence, this next question is directed to you, Holly. EdTech is obviously, it's not limited to K-12 and higher ed. So how is EdTech being utilized in corporate training and professional development? And then second question of this question is, what trends do you foresee in this sector?
Absolutely. This is a great question because I too just jumped into the corporate space about 2 years ago. And I really, I came in with my EdTech background and, ready to go and share all these tools, Kahoots, Padlets, all the kinds of different things. And corporate sees it in a different aspect. So you really have to assimilate to the environment you're in. And one of the things that I noticed in corporate is that people, they actually embrace, new technologies a lot faster than say in these other 2 sectors. In education, it's a little bit slower there. So in the corporate space, we will try things out because we make, two-way decisions, and we can always, try something else. If it doesn't work, we can pivot, because that's how the corporate mentality is. So I really think that, we use EdTech to, engage our learners a lot, that the audiences that we're serving, those are the main things that are happening in the corporate and training space. Also, too, though, when we're thinking about e-learning authoring tools, we want to create this environment that simulates what's happening in the real space, what's happening in the real world, so that if we're training, say, customer care agents who are I work for Amazon Pharmacy. So if they're taking a call from somebody, a customer, they understand how to manipulate different systems in order to help the customer get their prescription on time or change things or whatever they need to do. So having those sort of simulation-based activities that mimic what's happening in the real world, we really, when it comes to EdTech, we really love those things because it's a great ROI for us. And also too, it makes our agents feel very, very confident in their skills For the second part of the question, the trends I see are we're going to continue. I feel like when we talk about VIT, virtual instructor-led training, or in-person training, it feels like a lot of the time the Edtech and the instructor-led stuff, like we are trying to mimic the real world, and they're trying to come together again. It's interesting to see, because we're like, oh, this VR, this AR stuff, it's so real, like our real life. So I see those two coming together a lot more, and in combination with other different types of tools, obviously using the AI and things like that. But definitely in the corporate space, it's something that we embrace, and I like to see it when K-12 tools are actually used in the corporate space. It's really cool to see that they're being advocated for and they are being accepted.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much for that perspective. Switching gears a little bit, gamification in EdTech. Gamification is not new in the educational aspect, but it's gained popularity. And so what role do you see gamified learning experiences playing in the future of EdTech, and how do they impact student engagement, in your opinions?
I think it's very important. I've incorporated that into my courses. For example, when the students are having their activity and their steps tracked, there's an opt-in leaderboard that they can be put up on, and it gets very competitive. Students come in my hybrid classes where it's face-to-face. Also, they'll come in, they'll be like talking about it and challenging me, as their professor, that they really want to get higher on that leaderboard. And I have like a walking journey where they start at our college and they walk to another location based on the amount of time that they're doing the assignment. How far would they make it to? So, and there's the badges and awards for different things. And what I find interesting is there was a large university that contacted me to use my eFit software as part of their study. And we talked back and forth for a couple of weeks. And eventually they came back and they said, hey, Tim, we're sorry, we're not going to be able to use your software. And so I'm thinking, oh, darn, that's too bad. And they said, we have a very specific exercise routine that we want our participants in the study to follow. And we're afraid if they use your software, they'll do too much exercise and will ruin our study. I'm thinking, okay, well, that's fantastic news. That means my software is doing its job. And it really does motivate the students when you have those type of extra tools built into a course. So I've seen firsthand that that's a very successful approach to education.
Awesome. Thank you. And congratulations, I guess, that your tools work. So that's good.
Thank you.
Ladies, any other input on gamification and how it can help with student engagement?
Yes, and in my part of the world, in 2017, I was able to gamify a historical museum. And because students have cell phones now with the AR trigger app, you can bring up information, and once they pass a certain question or quiz, they can go on into, through the museum. So I think that once students, and of course I'm speaking from Japan, where we love games, we love video games. I think that educators, we need to come and meet the students where they are. They love games. Everyone loves games. We played games when we were children. So we should definitely bring those into our environments as educators. And I know that if educators and women, if we don't enter these kind of spaces and technologies, they're developed without us. So I think it's important that gamification, in my example of using it in an AR app in a historical museum, is where we want educators to go. We go into these spaces that are popular with students, popular with everyone.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. That kind of leads into the next question about AR and VR, and you gave a really great example with the museum. Holly and Tim, do you guys have any other examples or use cases for AR and VR in your spaces that you use?
We're not there yet with the VR when it comes to some pharmacy stuff, but I can say through working at the the School of Health Sciences. I used to work at Touro University at full-time as an instructional designer, using some of the VR tools to actually mimic what's happening in the health space and surgeries and different types, just simply, taking a patient's vitals, all those different things, and just seeing how the nursing students interact with those sort of experiences was very eye-opening. And I think that's something that's going to continue, especially, talking about, I know the metaverse, and if we're going to be stepping into these different types of, playgrounds, for lack of a better word, where everybody's going to be doing different things and learning real world skills again. It's going to mimic what we do in the real world. So that's one example I can say. In the health industry, it's definitely VR is going to have a huge role, especially with people not being able to go into brick and mortar spots, and they have to learn, because of geographical constraints, they have to learn, some at home somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
One of my colleagues, who's also going to be one of your panelists in November, Monica Hernandez Valencia, she started a VR lab at our college, and she successfully uses VR as part of her biology curriculum. And some of the things she does with it is pretty cool. And I just saw yesterday or the day before, Oxford University has developed a new tool, text to 3D worlds. So, like ChatGPT, you put in the text and it generates 3D worlds. And I think the future that we can create our own immersive VR worlds is just mind-blowing, and it's going to be amazing. But I do agree, it's really not there yet in terms of the technology, but I definitely see it really blowing up in the future, especially with discoveries like these.
Yeah. Wow. It's amazing. I feel so far behind sometimes. And so with the continuous evolution of technology, how can educators and institutions alike, how can they stay updated and effectively integrate new EdTech tools into their curriculums?
Well, I think that on the topic of virtual reality, that, excuse me, it was a little off-putting before because of the cost and the training involved. And what has been the game changer is, first of all, the headset prices went down, but you don't even need headsets to do VR in your classroom. A lot of these non-coding platforms are browser-based. So if a student has a laptop, and most students have a laptop, what Tim was saying is now you can AI a 360 environment or a 360 picture and put it into your desktop computer and walk around in that space. And how that changes, and Holly had mentioned simulations and stuff for her. You're doing pharmacy simulations, which are more in the corporate world. But the whole idea of doing simulations and having almost like first person experiences in a 3D world is kind of the game changer, where the 2D world is not really, it really falls flat. And for topics like oceanography, autonomy, biology, like those classes, once you get 3D elements in there, it's very hard to go back to just looking at the pictures in the 2D textbook.
Thank you.
So I believe your last question was, how do we keep up with all the changes related to that?
Sure.
So yeah, that's seems like a very overwhelming, nearly impossible task, because this stuff is changing daily. And I've been giving presentations on average lately of like once a week. That same presentation has to be changed within a week's time, because so much has changed with the information. And it is overwhelming. It can be overwhelming. So I think one of the keys, at least for education, is there needs to be professional development, and there needs to be more of it. I see a lot of schools might offer professional development for AI perhaps once or twice a semester. But as we all know, once or twice a semester is great, but by the time that's passed, it's already totally different. And several months from now, it's going to be even much different than it is today. I believe it's in December, Google Gemini is coming out, and some sources say it's 5 up to 10 times better than ChatGPT. And what type of impact is that going to have? What type of changes? You know, to me, it's very exciting. To a lot of people, though, that's very scary that these changes are happening so fast and people aren't able to keep up with it. So that is certainly a challenge.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
And
I think
also,
it's important. I think it's
go
important.
ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think it's important to understand that you don't need all the shiny objects every time that they come out. And I think it's important that educators, administrators, especially in K through 12 higher education, they have processes and things they go through to evaluate the ed tech tools that they're going to use in the space. So making them meaningful. I've far too many times I teach graduate students who are usually current teachers in the New York City public school system, and they tell me all the time, like, we got this tool, we've hardly ever used it, or we've never been trained on it. It's just something that was thrown at us. So I really think overall having that 30,000 foot view and really picking out what works best for you and where your institution or your organization is at, because keeping up with the Joneses is, like we're saying, is nearly impossible when it comes to the ed tech industry, because like the things are absolutely changing every second. You know, something happened probably while we're having this chat. So I think it's important that the evaluation phase is looked at and, you know, do a market survey of all the different tools that exist and get what you need, you know, and then put into place the training and things and implementation.
So Holly, that must have been a challenging time for you working with New York schools when they blocked ChatGPT from all of the school systems.
Yeah, I heard a lot of different things coming back from my students. I didn't work for them, but my graduate students do. And they said that it was a huge challenge for them that they just immediately blocked things. And we did have a very open conversation about it. They were disappointed that they didn't get even to explore it with their students and maybe do some, especially in English classes or history classes, do some writing type situations. So yeah, it created a barrier for them, and I really feel like it could have been a huge opportunity there for them.
Yeah, for sure. So now, Amelia, you're in Japan, and Holly, you and Tim both work for universities that could have the impact on people all over the world. And so could you guys take a moment and just think about, and then we can discuss the potential impact of EdTech on global education, and specifically thinking about its role in expanding access to quality education in those underserved regions.
Just in the underserved regions, just having access to instant education, instant tutoring, instant help, I think is just going to be huge. Even for students that maybe are in parts of the world that don't have a solid educational system, there's going to be plenty of opportunities for learning through AI that can be self-guided, that can adjust to the student's knowledge and the student's background and kind of guide them appropriately. And I think that ability is going to definitely improve as time goes on. And certainly that's going to be very beneficial for students to learn. And it's always important to have a teacher to guide, to motivate, for that personal interaction. And certainly when that's not available, if it's not available, the next best thing would be AI guided. And I certainly would never encourage AI guided over a teacher. I think teachers are the most important tool at our disposal. And I don't see that going anywhere, but I do think that AI is certainly a very good enhancement.
Yeah, absolutely. When you asked this question, I thought of a TED talk that I like to show to my students called, and I'm gonna butcher names just because I'm just gonna butcher it. It's Shagata Mitra, and he's from India. It's a school in the cloud where he puts computers in remote different regions of. He puts one in like a very busy, district in India, and then he puts one way out in like the mountains. and how that impacts the community. The students actually learn different things. It's really interesting if you have an opportunity to watch that. And I think that's what's going to happen with these tools that are coming out. If we give the accessibility, we give the access, people are going to be able to learn in ways we never thought possible. And also too, it's going to connect us. We always say, we hear a lot that music is a universal language. Well, I feel like education is a universal language, and just adding the support of EdTech is going to increase that across industries. On our podcast, we talk to people from all around the world about different EdTech tools, and we talk about the differences between what's happening. And like, we have NDA agreements here in the States where we can't share certain information, but in other countries, they can share whatever they want. So it's interesting to come at it from that perspective. And I can only imagine for learners what that's like when we're thinking about the release of certain tools and what they have access to and what they can do, based on certain things. But I really encourage people to watch that TED Talk, because it was done in 2013, but it's still applicable here to, 10 years later about the things that happened. So it can really, you can see the impact it would have on an international scale.
For sure.
And I think this is great that we're having this conversation. And I think also cultural awareness of how we're using these tools. For example, ChatGPT in the US, according to research, is used more for idea generation, to get ideas, where here it's information retrieval. It's kind of still in the pocket of being a Google type search engine. So how these tools will develop is going to change culturally too. And as Tim mentioned, I think the biggest potential is that, I think the lowest countries with the lowest GDP are seeing the most potential in this disruptive technology, because they stand to gain the most, I think. So I agree with Tim there, and the Global South is using this technology for, replacing clerical work and all sorts of opportunities for all sorts of countries to use it.
Thank you. And so with that, we know that business is booming for EdTech. And so with that, there's all kinds of startups that are coming and popping up to present different tools to be utilized, to be bought, just to be marketed to the average user. What criteria do you think, and Holly, you mentioned this before, but what criteria do you think educators and schools should use to evaluate the quality and effectiveness of these new products?
There's tons of rubrics out there on the web that you can use to evaluate EdTech tools, but I really feel like, coming from a perspective of an educator now working in the corporate space, accessibility is the #1 priority. That includes inclusivity. Can students with certain disabilities access the tool? Are the teachers able to navigate the tool? Because it's not just students who have disabilities, educators have disabilities as well. And I would say the intuitive nature of the tool. Is it easy to implement? Is it easy to use? Or are there barriers created by the tool that aren't necessary, that are going to really create a dynamic shift in how learning occurs? Is it going to interrupt or disrupt, and not in the good way, what's happening in the classroom or within the virtual learning space? And then I would say a third one would be definitely how they listen. Take a look at how they listen to their end users. Are they developing things in a vacuum, or are they actually coming out with case studies? Are they actually talking to the people who are purchasing their products or piloting their products, and incorporating that feedback into the development of new things or making things better? That's one thing I love about some of the EdTech founders and CEOs I've had on the show, is that they really are in touch with the end user and who their audience is, and they're just not sitting up on, in an ivory tower collecting their money. They're actually implementing things that the end user's like, this is something that we need to have incorporated into this tool that would make it much better for us. So there's a delicate balance between doing that and, satisfying the end user, and also, having a product that's everybody can use at the same time. So I think those three different things are important, accessibility being the top.
And I agree, the tool absolutely has to be super, super easy to use, because if it's not, the last thing that the teacher wants is lots and lots of questions and emails from their students trying to figure it out. And if that starts happening, that teacher is just not going to use it. And I would like to add a fourth to the list, and that's going to be privacy of data. What's happening with the data in these programs needs to be clearly spelled out, and the educators really need to understand what's happening to that data and how it's being collected, how it's being stored. Is it being used for additional training? And I see so many misconceptions about that topic. I don't know if that's another question coming up that we're going to talk about, or if I should discuss that now.
Yeah, go for it. Open it up. Let's do it.
So I'm in a lot of different educator groups on Facebook, LinkedIn, and I just read so many misconceptions about educators talking about the data that, for example, ChatGPT collects. They say, do not use ChatGPT in education because OpenAI uses your data to train their models and it's being shared. But the fact is, if you look at the OpenAI terms of service and privacy policy, the ChatGPT web interface, if you go to settings, you can turn it off to where your data is not being used for training. They only maintain your data for 30 days for legal purposes. Now, if you have a company that's using the OpenAI API to generate generative AI, OpenAI is not using that data for training at all. That's just built into the API where it's not being used for training. Now, you might have a company that's using the API, and even though OpenAI is not using their data for training, maybe the company is capturing that data and they're storing it in their own database. That is something that you need to read the terms of service and the privacy policy to find out. And if that's the case, you need to make decisions wisely. But as it stands now, ChatGPT, you can turn it off. And if it's the API, it's not using your data anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a quick question. What are the implications of them using that data for training purposes?
Number one, in education, it can break FERPA laws. And if you're putting personally identifiable information into a training model, that can have huge impacts for the educator that's responsible for that because you're breaking the FERPA law. But if you're putting non-identifiable information, somebody talking about the Civil War without their name in there, well, that's not breaking the FERPA law. And for me, I keep for my personal ChatGPT, I share my data so it can be trained because things I enter in there is probably not real interesting for other people to be reading. And it's nothing personal or nothing that's going to harm me. So I keep mine turned on. But if I were to put student data into that, I would certainly turn it off. And for the OpenAI API that I'm using, where I'll get the instant feedback on student papers, that's not saving their data or collecting it anyway.
Thank you for that input. Ladies, anything else?
That was a great point that Tim made, and I agreed with everything Holly said, and I couldn't have said it better. I do think there is a future in mobile because most of the world has mobile phones, not necessarily laptops, and the countries that do have laptops are kind of moving towards tablets. So I think a mobile platform is always really important if you're considering EdTech startups. And following along what Tim has said, this data collection, and in VR headsets, it's biometric, data harvesting, where it's taking in your pupil enlargement. If you say what's your favorite food, and your eyes grow, it's going to record that this is something you like. And I'm sure the advertisers are following along with this. And it's also very psychologically convincing. And I think we talked about this earlier, that once you're in the world, it does very much feel real. You feel a sense of presence. You are able to affect your surroundings. And with that comes the rise of virtual humans. And now we have virtual humans that are able to hold a conversation with us on our likes, which from my perspective as a language teacher, this is what I've always wanted in my classroom for the last 20 years, that all my students learning English could have a personalized conversation that basically is like, tell me more, and just really encouraging my students to speak. But on the same topic, and what Tim has brought up, that once the tech companies start harvesting this data, they're just going to use it to market. And there's a vulnerability there where you do think that sometimes maybe a virtual human is your best friend. I mean, I'm going into some of the darker side of it, but it's definitely very much concerning. And it's, I think, another thing that's unavoidable. And the best thing we could do is to teach our students to have digital literacy. They already know there's fake news. They've already, they're able to kind of sort out the good and bad. We just need to promote that more, because their lives are going to change immensely with the news technologies. And even if we can control them in the classroom, like the New York State, I guess, is like, don't use it in class. When they go home, outside of class, for all the faculty that Tim said is not using AI or they don't know what it is, I suggest just walking around Starbucks and seeing, university students having a split screen open. I mean, it can answer so many questions so quickly, not perfect accuracy, but if this is the worst it's ever going to be, it's still pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's definitely valid for sure. So this might be our last question, targeted to everyone. The COVID-19 pandemic, it definitely changed the scope of education, and it forced the rapid adoption of EdTech. And so with knowing that, how can the lessons that we learned during that time, the pandemic, how can we use those lessons to inform the future of EdTech development and implementation?
This is why I think going back is not an option. That we need to prepare for future things that are going to be happening, because we don't know if another pandemic is going to happen. We weren't prepared for that. We put people in emergency remote teaching, and then people develop these misconceptions about what online learning and virtual learning was, because of emergency remote teaching is not the same as online learning for those of us who are in this space or in the ed tech space. So making sure that we have plans in place when things happen, whether, in our culture and society, when we can't get to the in-person sessions, that we're prepared and ready to go with backup plans. I feel like a lot of people didn't have a backup plan, even for the backup plan. It's kind of just throw it up and see what sticks, and it wasn't very successful. And we're dealing with the repercussions of that, and what people thought as a society, or as people in higher ed or K-12, like, of what happened. And we're still dealing with the after effects, the trauma of teachers and things going online, and students not having access to devices or access to the internet who are in rural areas. So we definitely need to be more prepared from an infrastructure perspective into making sure that these things are available in the event, hopefully not, that we have another pandemic or something happens in the world that prevents us from, being in person.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think the pandemic, go ahead, Tim.
No, you can go ahead.
I think the pandemic did highlight all the digital divide that wasn't fully apparent before we had to put resources online. So we need to work on doing that now, and not for pandemics, for natural disasters. I mean, Japan has a history of earthquakes and tsunamis. It's not, if, it's when. And to make sure that the digital divide is addressed. And also, as Holly said, digital pedagogy, where teachers weren't familiar with how to teach online. Now is the time that we can kind of build up those skills, and also bring in a more positive approach. I don't think that face-to-face learning has been scrutinized as much as online learning was because of emergency remote teaching. It kind of, people swung back against it because of that experience. But it was in the middle of a pandemic. And I think that we need to just move forward and make online learning spaces better and prepare for the next natural disaster or, whatever is going to happen.
For sure. Thank you.
As terrible as the pandemic was, one thing it did do is I believe it really accelerated the development of EdTech. So many new products came out, so many processes that probably would not have taken place, at least not in the near future. And even I have to believe that ChatGPT came here sooner as a result of that, because it just accelerated everything in terms of EdTech. So it got us started on that. We're really at ground level right now. So the way it's going to develop and improve is just really exciting and mind-blowing for possibilities that what the future is going to bring with all of this.
For sure. Thank you, guys. I want to open it up now for closing remarks. So this is your moment to grandstand, get on your soapboxes. Tell us what you think, for all of our listeners, about the future of EdTech and any trends and predictions that you can think of, and how they're going to basically transform education. What do you guys think? Closing remarks. I'll give you a few moments. You don't have to answer immediately. What do you guys think?
I ask this question on my podcast, so I put people on the spot all the time. So it's only natural that I'm put on the spot with this question as well. What is the future of EdTech? And I get a lot of different responses from it's AI, it's VR, it's AR. I don't think it's going to be focused necessarily on one technology. It's going to be focused on how we as humans continue to impact what technology does and the evolution of that, and how we accept it and assimilate it into our lives. So the future is very much going to be the compromise between what's AI machine generated and what we do as humans, and how we're incorporating those into our processes, our workflows, teaching. That includes classrooms, that includes higher ed, that includes corporate, all sectors, and how that's all going to work. So I believe that's what the future is when it comes to EdTech, and how it's all going to be working together in the ecosystems that we have.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So those of you that are teachers listening to this, you give out assignments to your students. So I'm going to give you an assignment. That's going to be to go to OpenAI and create a free ChatGPT account, or go to bing.com and click the chat link and play around with generative AI. See what it does, learn about its capabilities, and just mess around with it. That's a really great way to learn. Those of you that aren't teachers, that are in industry, you're now in school and you have an assignment, and it's the same thing. So that's really the best advice I can give anyone that's not use it, is play with it and learn about it, because whether you like it or not, you might love it, you might hate it, it's not going to matter. It is part of your future. And so it's best that you're prepared for it by having some experience using it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And on the final note, I think that the future is going to involve immersive learning, and we need to, as instructional designers, think how we can teach our students inside 360-degree environments with 3D objects. It's a real game changer. And it's coming with all the big ed tech companies. It's coming down in price. I think, as I mentioned before, mobile is getting more traction everywhere in the world. And with that, augmented reality is becoming more accessible. And it's also a great opportunity for educators to jump in there and maybe try to influence the kind of decisions that tech companies are making to make these apps and these services something that can be educational, because they're phenomenally fun to use. And I think that educators should jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Your perspectives, your input, I think they're highly valuable, especially given your background and your expertise. So thank you. Your contributions are, immeasurable. Hopefully those who are watching will take your words to heart, to definitely educate themselves and be open to the future for sure. And so, again, thank you. And this will conclude the Future of EdTech
Thank you.
Arbisoft. Yeah, you guys are awesome. Way to go.
Thank you, Kay. Thank you,
Thank
Holly and
you.
Jim.
Enjoyed the
Nice-
conversation.